Now, there are a slew of other useful tools on Yahoo Finance's homepage that you can also use to become a smarter investor. Here to share some of his favorites is Ross Mack, a Yahoo Finance contributor and host of the Financial Freestyle podcast. Good to see you, Ross. Now, you have two tools that you use daily. Tell us about them.
Yeah, so when it comes to Yahoo Finance tools, they're second to none, right? Two of the ones that I use the most anytime I'm analyzing a stock is first holders, and then secondly is statistics, right? So let's actually talk about holders. I think it's very important as a young retail investor, right? You don't have everything that a typical institutional investment firm will have. You don't have other analysts, et cetera. So one way to actually use this best is to piggyback on them. And what I mean by that is if you go to a holders list and you look at a stock, now you get the ability to see who actually owns this. And why that's important, well, one, it's giving you a sense of saying, hey, the guys who are actually much smarter than me own this. Therefore, they've already done all the hard work. So for instance, say I go look at Apple, right? I want to see who owns Apple. You're going to see Vanguard, Fidelity, BlackRock. You're going to see Warren Buffett, Berkshire owns it. But the reason I say that is like, imagine going to try to find a new restaurant. If this has a Michelin 4 or 5 star, guess what? That's telling you it's a good restaurant. And I say that in the same breath of saying this will be a good investment. If someone tells you, here's a penny stock, and you see no one actually owns this of names that you've become familiar with, the Fidelities, the BlackRock, the PIMCOs of the world, probably it's a little too risky for you. And so first thing I always recommend is look to see who owns this, because it lets you know the teams that have a dedicated analyst team, a dedicated portfolio management team that's literally calling the management teams of those companies, they've already done all the hard work for you. And then secondly, I love statistics. And the reason I say that, it's almost like a FICO score of a company. You need to know exactly what that company is owning. You need to know how much cash they have on their balance sheet, how much debt they have. You want to know how much revenue they're actually making. And on top of that, another thing I like to look at, you also want to get a sense of some of their price to earnings ratios, right? Like, I think when it's all said and done, this gives you a benefit of being able to compare certain companies on an apples to apples basis by just looking at sheer ratio numbers. For instance, a price to earnings is going to give you a sense of just how much money you're paying for every dollar of earnings that that company has. And so I like looking at companies that have a lower price to earnings ratio relative to other comparable companies. That's letting you know maybe it's undervalued. And so when it's all said and done, I love those two statistics the best.
And that's good, because a lot of times people might get information and won't know how to sort of use that, but doing it through the platform and through these tools, they actually get to make sense of it. So Ross, of course, want to talk a bit about your podcast, Financial Freestyle, because while you give advice about investing in the market, you also dive into entrepreneurship and investing in one's own ambitions. You spoke to Carolyn Aronson, founder of It's a 10 Haircare. So let's take a look at a quick clip.
What advice would you give to young aspiring entrepreneurs when it comes, irrespective of the field, but like what advice would you give to them?
In general, absolutely. 18 years into it, the first advice I would give is don't listen. Don't listen to your doubters. Don't listen to the people who tell you you can't or you won't. And ultimately, think about the possibilities. So always think big, but also basically dot your I's, cross your T's, have your proper contracts in place. Hire the trademark attorneys. Get the proper people to advise you, possibly the legal team behind you. That's actually going to help you set up your little tiny business from the get-go properly. Because you know what? Sometimes they grow up, like my brand did. When I started this company, I certainly didn't think that we would be in 117 countries.
Wow.
18 years later, It's a 10 is just one of my brands. I have 15 companies now. So you know what? There's a lot of things to cover. And when you're just starting out, you kind of forget about those things, but they're crucial.
And Ross, you raised some good points there about the doubters, especially when you're trying to start and grow a business. So tell us about this interview and some of the other topics that you're covering on Financial Freestyle.
Well, I really enjoyed this interview. Carolyn is what I would say a young mogul, right? I think her hair care company has grossed over $1 billion in revenue. But I think the interesting thing is you could understand her struggle, right? She's had a failed company. And I think the resiliency of that allowed my viewers to actually say, wow, I can actually do the same thing. And so when it's all said and done, Financial Freestyle is a podcast that is near and dear to me because I am taking people on a journey while talking and uncovering some of the secrets that many successful people have uncovered along their pathway to becoming successful. So we're talking to whether it's C-suite individuals that work at financial firms, and they'll give us information and, shortcuts on how to actually become proficient when it comes to their retirement planning, financial literacy, how to get out of debt, how to actually get financing. And we also talk to entrepreneurs, and we'll talk to them and actually see what are some of the paths that they took to actually become successful. And I think at the end of the day, one of the great testaments of, a person that's successful is speaking to them, right? And allowing you to now make shortcuts so you don't have to make the same mistakes they have. And so that's what Financial Freestyle is. We're breaking financial literacy down, making it more digestible. And we want every viewer that's watching it to leave inspired and, more importantly, more educated than you can.
And I love that you hit it at sort of every sort of level of investment and entrepreneurship. That's very important to get everyone on board. A big thank you to Ross, of course, for joining us. And of course, you won't want to miss it. We have lots coming up with Ross and Financial Freestyle. He's got some great guests coming up. Joy Butts, she's a senior business consultant for Chase for Businesses Coaching for Impact on September 23rd. And Kristen Meyer, editor-in-chief at ETF.com on September 30th as well. Some great interviews to look up for. And of course, everyone tune into Financial Freestyle with Ross Mack every Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to tune in. And of course, we'll have more investing rules for you to build your wealth throughout this week with David and John Otenschneider, hosts of Living Not So Fabulously, joining the show tomorrow as well.